All right, I'm ready.
Yeah, so we start with your name and what you...
My name is Stacy Young, and I got into Scientology in 1975, and I got out in 1989. So I was in for almost 15 years. What else do you want me to talk about?
What kind of work did you've done for the organization, and what kind of hierarchy you have been working, how high or at which level?
Okay. When I first got into Scientology, I wanted to become an auditor, which is their form of counseling. And so I joined the Sea organization, which is their, basically it's the unincorporated group of people that actually run Scientology. And I went out to Los Angeles and joined the Sea organization there. And I did some training as an auditor, audited hundreds of hours, hundreds of people. And then I became a supervisor of auditors, training people to audit. And then I got into the Guardian's office, which was the forerunner of the Office of Special Affairs. I got in about a year after the big raid in 1977, when the FBI raided the intelligence departments of Scientology in Los Angeles and Washington, D.C. That was what led to the criminal indictments of the leadership of Scientology in 1978, for which 11 high-level Scientologists were convicted of criminal wrongdoing.
And what was your job within this forerunner of the OSA?
I was in public relations. I was at that time in charge of personnel, in charge of getting new people into the Guardian's office, making sure that people were doing their jobs correctly, taking care of them if they had personal problems, things like that.
So not handling critics or journalists or...
No, not at that time. Not at that time. Then I was, when the CMO, when the CMO took over the Guardian's office in 1981, my life changed fairly drastically, and I was soon thereafter promoted to Author Services, Inc., where David Miscavige was working, and it was from ASI that all of Scientology was being run at that time, when David Miscavige was in Author Services. I was promoted to be his organizing officer, is what it was called. That is the position from which, in a Scientology organization, you take care of the personnel, you take care of making sure that things are organized correctly and things like that.
Mm-hmm. And how long you worked for Miscavige directly or personally?
For almost 6 months. And during that time, it was in 1982, and it was then that I began to realize that the leadership of Scientology was totally corrupt. The leadership of Scientology didn't even believe in Scientology.
Who especially?
David Miscavige, Norman Starkey, Lyman Spurlock, Marty Rathbun. I mean, how many people do you want me to name?
When did you read?
The entire organization at the top of Scientology is completely corrupt. They find it laughable that people lower down in Scientology believe all this stuff.
And did they talk with you about that?
They talked. I was never really part of the very inner clique, because I never agreed with what they were doing. It always it really broke my heart to find that what these people were doing, who were leading Scientology, were basically ridiculing everything that I thought Scientology was supposed to be. And I ended up becoming so disillusioned and so exhausted and so really close to the breaking point that I refused to go back to my job because one night we weren't sleeping very much. David Miscavige used to keep us from sleeping from Tuesday to Friday every week. You couldn't sleep for 3 days in a row. And I didn't do very well without any sleep. And, you know, we didn't eat very well. We never slept. We were under an enormous amount of stress all the time and really very close to the breaking point
That means
all the time.
you work in the same office with Cabbage?
Well, mine was next door to his.
And where was it?
It was on Sunset Boulevard in Hollywood.
Also Services Inc.
Author Services Inc. The first building that Author Services had was on Sunset Boulevard on the 9th floor.
And how would
And David Miscavige screams so loudly with such profanity that you could be down on the sidewalk in Hollywood and you could hear him screaming on the sidewalk from the 9th floor of this office building. It was a nightmare for me. It was a total nightmare.
he screamed to you?
He screamed to me. He screamed to everyone. Because he didn't like the way we were doing things. He had been taught how to be an executive by L. Ron Hubbard, who also screamed at people, cursed people, used incredible profanity. But Miscavige cursed more than any person I've ever heard before. And finally, one night, you know, I was refusing his orders. He was ordering me to do things to people that I thought was vicious, that I thought was not what Scientology was supposed to be all about. And I was refusing to do what he was telling me to do. Well, nobody refuses to do what David Miscavige tells them to do. But I felt that he was betraying the fundamental principles that I thought Scientology stood for. And so I found myself in a nightmare position. And he finally, one night, took me into his office, or my office actually, and became absolutely furious with me. I was very tired. I was very hungry. I was in a very fragile state of mind anyway, and he screamed and cursed at me until I felt that I was about to lose my mind. So I had to get myself out of that situation, and I was sent to the Rehabilitation Project Force for that.
To the RPF?
Yeah.
And what was your mistake you made?
I refused to work for David Miscavige, and I called him a suppressive person and a psychopath.
During that conversation?
And not to his face. I told this to, actually I told it to Jesse. I told it to another person. And
he wrote it down in that?
And Miscavige found out about it, and I was sent to the RPF.
And who assigned you to the RPF?
Yeah.
And how would you describe an RPF?
Well, when I was assigned to the RPF, I was up at the secret compound in Gilman Hot Springs near Hemet. And it was 4 o'clock in the morning. I was asleep in my room, and there was a knock on the door, and 2 guards came into the room and ordered me to pack my clothes and escorted me to a van, which drove me down to the RPF in Pack. And I got there at about 6:30 in the morning. At that time, it was in the basement of the big blue building, the complex. And I was told to change my clothes. I was...
Did you get your prisoner uniform on then?
Yeah.
Black uniform?
Yeah.
And you get your black or gray?
No, you don't get that. You have to work up to having a gray armband. You don't have anything when you first get into the RPF.
You first have nothing, no band.
No. The bands are symbols that you've begun to
Develop.
rehabilitate yourself.
But you start with nothing.
You start with nothing. You start with nothing, right?
And then comes the first band.
And then comes a white armband. And you get a white armband when you meet some requirements that that show that you are starting to be an ethical person. And then you get a gold armband when you meet other requirements that show that you are starting to be responsible enough that you could actually be a member of a group again.
After the gold armband, you were out?
After the gold armband, then you get to graduate if they approve, if they decide that you are rehabilitated enough to be amongst the regular people and you won't cause any more trouble.
That means from one moment to the other, you lost your job at Gilman Hot Springs where you worked? Or
No, I lost my job in Los Angeles.
in Los Angeles, but why you have been at Gilman Hot Springs?
Because I was in trouble and I was sent up there to do the running program.
The running.
You know, there was a big orange pole and you run around the pole all day, yeah.
And which pole was it, or where was it?
It was out of Gilman Hot Springs.
At Gilman Hot Springs?
Yeah, there were two poles.
Near the golf course?
There was no golf course at that time. I think it was near where the golf course is now. Yeah.
Near the film studio.
But at that time, yeah. At that time, it was just...
It's across the road.
Yeah, it was across the road.
Everybody is living on the other side.
No, it was across from there. It was on the other side.
On the other side.
Yeah.
The pole is on the other side.
Yeah. And do you know who David Mayo is? Okay, David Mayo was in so much trouble that they set up a separate pole for him. So he could run around this pole all by himself. And then everybody else was running around this other pole because nobody could talk to David Miscavige. To David Mayo.
That means you had to run for hours of
12 hours a day.
Around that pole.
Yeah. Until you realized that you had been faulty in your thinking and were ready to think straight again and be a proper Scientologist.
For how many days went this on?
Well, I was forced to continue the running program after I got into the RPF. We did it in Los Angeles, in Griffith Park, in the parking lot of the Greek amphitheater, which is a big, it's a big auditorium. It's a open air auditorium where they have music and things like that.
So you run around on the...
We ran around the parking lot of the Greek amphitheater. There were about 25 people in the RPF who were on the running program, as well as some executives from ASI and some other people that had been assigned by DM to the running program.
And they run around for days?
For days.
For days.
12 hours a day.
And when starts the real work, like renovating things, like the regular?
On my RPF?
Yeah.
My RPF was a bit of a more extreme situation than most because I had been working directly for DM. DM was convinced that I was an agent for the government, that I had been
government? For the US government?
For the United States government, or perhaps an agent for an attorney who at that time was causing lots of trouble for Scientology named Michael Flynn. And DM had me interrogated for weeks.
He personally?
No, he had me interrogated. He had two very large former Marines lock me in a room, and one of them walked back and forth in front of me, screaming at me, accusing me of all kinds of things and demanding that I confess to who I was working for, what kinds of things I had stolen from ASI, all kinds of extreme paranoia.
And this was in the Blue Complex?
This was in the basement of the Blue Complex.
The basement?
Yeah. And so one of them, Rick Azarian, walked back and forth screaming at me while another person, Andre Tabayoyan, sat at the e-meter and watched the meter to see what I was thinking. And then so I would go on the running program first I would be interrogated in the morning, and then I would be sent up to the running program in the afternoon and until the end of the night. And so one day I hurt my back very badly running on the running program, and I was ordered by the doctor to, not move. And so DM wanted me transferred to Florida, here to Clearwater, to get me away from my husband at the time, because he decided that I would be a bad influence on my husband, because I was I was being critical of him, I was being, disaffected, and he didn't want my influence to rub off on my husband, who was an ASI staff member. And so I was ordered to Clearwater, but the doctor said that it would be dangerous for me to be moved because of my back injury, and so I was incarcerated on the 7th floor of the complex for nearly 5 months, not allowed to leave the 7th floor, under guard 24 hours a day. And
People slept in your room or in the night? Room or
about 9.
nine.
About 9. There were bunks. It was a room filled with bunks, 3 tiers high. And I had a bed of my own because of my back injury. So I was having to do work, administrative work for the RPF because of my back. But I was also lying on the floor, cleaning the shower on my back, doing, cleaning just on my back because I couldn't move. So I was still being forced to do manual labor, but it was a little unusual.
Mm-hmm. So you had been there imprisoned for more than 5 months, Blue Complex.
Mm-hmm.
And how was your condition after the 5 months? It getting worse?
My mental condition or my physical condition?
And mental.
Well, my mental condition was such that I now was acutely aware of the fact that I was in an organization that would stop at nothing to shut me up if I continued to speak out the way I had done, which caused me to go to the RPF. I mean, my experience with David Miscavige is what shattered my illusion about Scientology. And I knew from that point forward that I had to be careful of what I said. I had to be careful of what I did. I was ready to leave at that time, but my husband wasn't ready to leave yet. And I wasn't willing to leave him in there because I was afraid I would never see him again. So my state of mind on the RPF was one of extreme fear. They didn't allow me to communicate with my husband at all while I was on the RPF. I didn't know what had happened to him. He didn't know what had happened to me. I was very frightened. I was very much concerned to make the leadership, particularly Miscavige, believe that I was now ready again to toe the line, ready again to be a good Scientologist and to be quiet.
And you had any chance to flee the scene, that you can go out of that?
No, I was not able. Oh no, I couldn't leave the 7th floor while I was incarcerated. No, but I graduated the RPF. I was able to convince Miscavige, who had personally approved my getting out of the RPF. I was able to convince him that I was no longer a threat for Scientology, and he allowed me out of the prison. And then I was basically watched for several months to make sure that I was really okay.
You went back to your job?
I went back to a job. I didn't. I was put in sort of a low-level supervisory job so that they could kind of watch me and see how I did. In LA, yeah.
So you never worked again at Gilman, for example?
I didn't work there. I was there quite often. But I was never posted there. I was posted in LA because I was in OSA. I went back into OSA after that, and I went into public relations at that point, and became the editor of Freedom Magazine, and because I'm a writer, and so they posted me as a writer at that point. I think that Miscavige no longer wanted me in charge of any personnel because I don't think he trusted me that way.
And how would you describe an RPF? As what?
It's a political prison. That's what it is. People are sent to the RPF who are dissident, disaffected, critical in any way. That's where they're sent. And they stay there until they stop being critical and dissident and are willing to behave themselves. And they don't get off the RPF until they're willing to behave themselves. And that's the bottom line.
And that means you have been there only for 5 months. It's a very long time.
No, I was there for longer than that, but I was incarcerated on the 7th floor for 5 months. I was on the RPF for, I think, more like 9 months. Yeah.
And when was that? In which year?
In 1982 and into 83.
And when you left finally Scientology, the organization? When did you left?
My husband and I finally left together in 1989, in July. Basically, from 1982 until 1989, I was waiting for him to realize that it was time to go. He tried to escape. He was on the RPF up in Happy Valley in 1987 and 88. And he did try to escape across the Indian reservation through the fields. And what he was hoping to do was to get a hold of me in LA before Scientology discovered that he had escaped. And so but it took him longer than he had thought it was going to take him to get to a phone, because he went to the phone of some Indians that lived on the reservation and asked them if he could call me. And by the time he called me, I was surrounded by guards in my office in LA because they had found out that he had escaped, and they knew that he would be trying to call me. So I was supposed to help these security guards get him back. Well, of course, I didn't want to help them get him back. I wanted to get out with him, but I couldn't tell them that, because then they'd hold me under guard, and then we'd never get a chance to see each other. So he called, and these people are all standing around me saying, find out where he is so we can go get him. Find out where he is so we can go get him. And he said, do they know? And I said, yes. And he said, okay, then they want to know where I am. And I said, yes. And because nobody else was listening on the phone, fortunately. And he said, okay, then I'm going to have to hang up. I'm going to have to, contact you later. And he hung up the phone. And they said, well, so did he tell you where he is? Did he tell you where he is? And I said, no, I couldn't, he hung up before I could find out. So, but then he called a cab, a taxi
to the Indian reservation.
At the Indian reservation, and he was going to take him into Hemet to a hotel so that he could hole up there until he could get a hold of me. And the security guards out at Hemet followed the cab. And so he got out of the taxi at the motel in Hemet, and they surrounded him. And so he said, you have to let me go into the motel. I want to talk to my wife. And if you don't, I won't come with you unless you let me talk to Stacy. I want Stacy to be brought out here. And so this went on for all night long. They were arguing with him and trying to talk him out of this, and, trying to get him to come back with them. And he was refusing.
I went to Happy Valley.
Yeah. And he was refusing. And so finally, in the middle of the night, they came and got me out of bed and said, you've got to go up to Hemet because Vaughn is refusing to cooperate unless he gets to see you.
You drove down.
So somebody drove me up to Hemet, or to Gilman Hot Springs, and I was taken into the ethics office there. And this woman,
compound.
Yeah.
In which building?
In Qual. I don't know if well, it wasn't Qual, it was the WDC building, the Watchdog Committee building, actually.
Where these?
It's if the guard booth is over here and the ship is over there, it was over there. It was one of the buildings over there. And this woman, Janet Air, Swanson, who was one of DM's sort of head people, sat me down and said, you know, Vaughn wants to talk to you, and I just want to make sure that your ethics are in and you're okay, and you know you are with us and trying to get him back and all this stuff. And I said, oh yeah, I'm totally with you. I'm totally with you, because I thought we'd never see these people again. You know, I thought finally when Vaughn and I got together out at Hemet, we would go. But instead, they took me to see him in the hotel, and we were just gonna call the police and get them to escort us out of town and get these people to leave us alone. But the problem was we weren't really ready to be out of Scientology. We wanted to be out of the Sea Org, but we wanted to be public Scientologists, you know, and have a little White House with a little picket fence and a dog and have a nice life and continue to be able to go up the bridge to total freedom. You know, I mean, we were still of the mindset. And so we decided that we would go back and route out, which is, you know, you have to get sec checked and you have to go through this whole procedure so they will let you go. And we went back, so we went back. And they put us up in this beautiful apartment suite and just were treating us like royalty, because, at Gold, because...
Near the ship, or the other side?
Say what?
Near the ship?
On the other side.
The other side.
On the other side. At that time, it's different now than it was then. This was in 1987, 88. And it wasn't, a lot of the things weren't built yet then. But, so they put us up in this beautiful VIP suite. And because they were so worried about Vaughn, because he was a very high-level executive, and he and I both had information that they didn't want us to leave with. So they were treating us very, very nicely and all this kind of stuff. And the next day, DM and Norman called Vaughn up to the ship and talked him back in. Basically told him that it had all been a big mistake, and that, you know, everything was going to be okay now. They were going to get everything corrected that he was upset about, and everything would be fine. Well, you know, to make a long story short, they ended up talking him into going back to the RPF.
He went back to the prison camp?
Yes. I mean, these people have a control over your mind, which is very difficult to explain. It's very difficult to explain.
Mind control? Pure mind control?
Well, but what does that mean? I mean, that doesn't really mean anything when you say that. It's you know, you really honestly believe when you're a Scientologist that it is the only route to happiness. And that if you leave it, you have no hope of ever being happy. I mean, you honestly believe that when you're in there. And I don't know how they're able to accomplish that belief. All I can do is describe it. You know, Vaughn agreed to go back to the RPF because he truly believed that it was very important for him to continue to be a Scientologist. This was the only way that they would allow him to continue to be a Scientologist. And so, you know, people submit to the most degrading, abusive, terrifying experiences that you can imagine for the sake of this elusive and delusional idea.
Thank you.